Our talk is going to be on the subject of freedom and love. And our first theme is free your mind and love will follow. In a society that is so preoccupied with the subject of freedom to express itself, I'm amazed at what percentage of the population has yet saw fit to use that freedom completely and totally. Even when we're examining freedom issues, we restrain ourselves based upon our beliefs and our attitudes about ourselves. And then we wonder why we're not as healthy as we should be, happy as we should be, because we're not taking freedom to its outer limits. We're almost afraid to. We think because we had some social experimentation with drugs, with rock and roll, with music, with sex, with color in clothing, hairstyles and links, communal living, that was our social experiment in freedom. Well, only about 1/1000th of 1% of the American population ever participated in that. But the rest were spectators to it and gave themselves justification when anything went wrong or any problems came from that to justify why they shouldn't have participated in it. And since that time, we've done very little in the way of real social experimentation as a whole. Only those people who have stepped out of the paradigm experiment with their lives. Not always do people who say they're experimenting with freedom experiment with their own freedom. They fall into someone else's notion of freedom. So they go off on some other person's trip. And whether it's a philosophical trip, all those people went out to see Rajneesh in the 1970s and 80s, that was not their trip. That was his trip. That was his freedom. He was having fun with that. Other people couldn't have the same fun because they were living under his guidelines, his criteria, his discussion of what would or would not be a reality for them to accept. So if you wanted to be a part of his trip, you had to accept his reality. The trouble is almost every part of our life is controlled by someone else's notion of our reality. So we buy into someone else's reality, and then when it doesn't work completely, when our fantasy of what should be happening if we do something with our lives doesn't meet reality face to face and see a clear reflection, we panic. And in our panic, we don't know what our options are. So we start to regress back to those times and conditions and those criteria that were familiar. So we act infantile, or we regress emotionally, and we're left with very few options. So my discussion today is going to be show you how you can use freedom consciously, spiritually. And for me to express my freedom, I cannot feel good about it if at the same time I'm in any way denigrating you. So it's not about denigration. I remember on some of the first freedom marches I was participating in back during the Vietnam War, and the people who were marching against the war were hating the people who were pro-war. And I said, that's not a right attitude. If you don't like someone because they're against the sanctity of life and you're denying them their sanctity of life, how much different are you? So my idea was to work for freedom with freedom and work for peace with peace, not with anger, not with hostility. We have too much of that, and it doesn't work. Not with over 100 million people being killed from 1900 to today, and these senseless and useless conflicts. And none of these conflicts could occur. They could not occur if they did not have the support of people in mass, large groups, following false beliefs. The trouble is, when you're in a belief, you never know it's false. You may feel it's false, but you don't stand up and say, hey, this is wrong, stop what we're doing, it's stupid, it's destructive. Look at what I try to do in nutrition when I go out, and now it's getting at least more acceptable to be someone like myself. Could you imagine what it was like when I would go out at the beginning of my career when no one in America, I was the only person going out and debating. When they needed an environmentalist, they'd call me or one or two other people, or they'd call a nutrition. I'd be up, and I'd go up against these doctors, and they'd say, well, you a medical doctor? No. You board certified? No. Well, then, you're not an expert. Well, I'm healthy. Well, that's irrelevant. Could have fooled me. You're sitting there with this big fat pot belly, Your heart right now is going into spasm. Your arteries are so hard, I could match them with concrete. Right? Your brain is no more room in your skull. It's so expanded. You can't even think straight. Your body probably smells, and you got hair up your nose. Now, none of the above is true here. And I couldn't get people to realize the simplicity of health because you had to be a doctor. And that always confused me. Why do you got to be a doctor? Well, stupidly, I went back to school and became a doctor. I got 2 doctorates because I thought if you got that, then they'd pay attention to you. Well, they didn't. And I learned a lesson. I learned a lesson that no matter what they say, if anything you do, anything you represent at any time to the status quo challenges them, then they must marginalize you. They must make you invisible. So large segments of the American population are invisible. Artists are invisible, except when you want to hear some music, but you don't want to listen to the lyrics. You see, you don't want to hear what Simon and Garfunkel are saying when they were saying things against the war, or Joan Baez, or Bob Dylan, or rap people today. We don't want to hear that through the anger of the rap music is a message of what they're saying. That's their poetry frequently. But because the words offend, because we've made words offensive, we're not willing to look at the meaning of that word from that person's perspective. We're simply saying, oh, it's pornographic, it's violence, it's an assault against social standards. Well, when was the last time any public official, any policy leader went into Harlem and said on the street, I'd like to know what you think about this world and how I'm running it for your benefit. Do you think I'm doing a good job, bad job? What would you suggest? I don't see anyone doing that. Maybe at election time, but then we know it's all false and a pretense, right? So they put it in their lyrics, or they put it in their art, or they put it in their work, just as artists always have. So what do? We make sure artists are never given credibility for being a conscious part, a credible part of the ingredient for change. So we're trying to come up with a society that works and functions for everyone's interest, and it doesn't. And the people who it doesn't, we exclude from the formula. We don't focus on them. We don't show them. They don't exist. Gee, how convenient. In fact, any reformer we denigrate. We take all reformers, and many of you in this room are reformers, I'm sure, in your own careers, in your own fields, your own lives. And the moment you start to reform, what you're reforming against is the paradigm that's the mountain and you're the little tiny ant down here. They're not going to let you change it. You can't show me an institution that has changed. Institutions don't change. Individuals change, not institutions. They become completely self-evolving, meaning they perpetuate their own self. Every time there's a new disease, now there are 14,000 new foundations to support that disease. It doesn't matter if the disease has been cured. They continue on, right? That's the way it works. So one day you wake up and you say, this is all kind of crazy. What can we do about it? And what we can do about it is we can start to ask some new questions, not the answers. I have no right to give you answers because I cannot presuppose that my knowledge is any more significant, any more dynamic, any greater than yourself. I merely raise questions. That way, my participation becomes neutral to how you observe or respect or reject whatever I'm saying. So I lay it all on the table and I'm not connected to it. There's no ego connection to it. So it's not like, here's the Psalms of 16, read it and become orthodox on it. It doesn't work that way with me. It's the question, the quality of the question allows us to grow, not the answers. We've got too many people with answers. Shirley MacLaine's got answers, right? You go sit in a branch on a crystal, buy some property from a 28,000-year-old Seuss out there, and everybody lives happily ever after in Oregon. Doesn't work that way. Be careful about people who promise you answers, because generally they're the false prophets, and we've got a lot of them. How complete am I right now? That's where I start. Because what you're going to be wanting to deal with is the incompleteness in your life. The completeness you know about, because you know how it feels. It's the incompleteness that bothers you. It's not the good night's sleep that you wake up worrying about. It's the bad night's sleep. It's not the breasts that feel great. It's the breast with the lump, right? It's not the person that embraces you unconditionally and loves you completely and with a quality of character to go with it. It's the person that you're not sure of, that withholds, that plays a game. that creates an emotional abandonment before they've physically gone. You know the emotions are not there because it's something that isn't connecting. No matter what a person says, you feel it. That concerns you. Why? Why me? Why now? So we start by saying, how complete am I? Am I enough to be enough? Now think of this for a moment, and if at any time you don't understand the point I'm making, please raise your hand and I'll make it again in some other way so that we can understand where I'm taking this. If I feel that I'm enough, and if I know who I am, then I'm absolutely certain that I'm enough to do anything I need to do. If I'm uncertain about being enough, then I'm going to have more questions, and the questions are going to stop me. Can you do something? I'm not sure. Why are you not sure? I don't know if, I don't, and suddenly I don't becomes I'm unsure of self. Most people can do anything they want to do if they think they're enough to do it, because you got to be enough to do enough. You got that? That's very important. I called a woman one day before the New York City Marathon. I don't think she's here. I don't. No. Luann's here? No, I don't see her. And Luann had trained maybe 2 miles, 3 miles maximum. But she has a very strong spirit. She is making changes in her career, going from being a nurse administrator and not liking the hospital setting, but not having the courage to get out of it. Well, what about the money? So suddenly money became more important than making a career change with happiness and taking risks. I got to stay in this bad place with these negative vibrations and these sick people that I'm not helping on any level, but I'm a happy person. Wrong. Wrong. All right? Don't play the game. No, that's a game. Do you understand what the game is? What's the game? What's the game when a person says, I'm happy, but I'm not going to make any changes from an unhappy position? What's the game? Denial. Denial, absolute denial. Good point. What are they denying?
Their real self.
What?
Their real self.
The real self and the existence. The existence of what?
Themselves.
Of themselves where?
In a wrong paradigm.
In a paradigm, there's unhappiness, and they're not acknowledging it. There's fear that is holding them back. So when you hear people say, oh, I'm happy, but you don't see them manifesting it, then they're not happy. What you are, you will manifest. So it's not what a person says that counts. It's what they do. You are what you do, not what you say. Got that? Now remember that. Don't listen to what people say. Look what they do. That's what determines the person. And we've mastered the art of telling people what they'd like us to tell them. As a result, we falsely mirror everyone else's fears through our own eyes and suggest to them that what they need us to be, we will be. But if it's not who we really are, then we're being in denial about who we are, and as a result, we're not going to have a confidence to be enough of anything. All we are is enough of a chameleon to know what to say at the appropriate moment to people to keep them convinced that we should be in the job we should be in, we should be their friend, we should be their lover, we should be their confidant or whatever. But we don't really believe it inside. So I said to Luann, Luann, tomorrow I want you to do something. She said, what? I said, run the New York City Marathon. She said, run the marathon. I said, yeah, sure, why not? She said, well, I said, hold on. Are you going to say, I can't? Now, you haven't thought about this. Think first about what you're willing to commit yourself to. Because what you're willing to commit yourself to also tells me what you're willing not to commit yourself to. Do you see? That's a very important point. Do you understand what I just said? Anyone not understand that? Because if she had not been willing even to commit herself to trying, then she would have allowed herself to stay within the boundaries that exist almost in all people. There are tribes in this world where if you commit anything they consider wrong, they will condemn you to die. But they don't kill you. You kill you. Not a sword or a gun. You go in, sit under a tree, Later in the day, you're dead. You simply die. You will yourself to die because you believe you will die. Have you ever seen how they train elephants in Indonesia for logging? Early in life, they take the elephants and they cross-chain them with thick, large chains that make it impossible for the elephant to move or break free. As a result, they create the reality space for the elephant. Now, the elephant knows that if they try to go anywhere, they can't. Later, they take all this off and they put a simple little reed onto the elephant and tether it to a tree. The elephant, with one yank, would break that, but he doesn't break it. Why doesn't he break it? The condition has created a reality. Does the reality exist without the conditioning? No. So our reality isn't real if it's based upon a false condition. It's a false reality, right? So most of the things we believe in that cause us problems and discomfort and crisis are false realities. So the whole idea of being healthy is to get past false realities to real realities. But the thought process itself is not a reality. How many times have you made a thought real? Huh? A lot. All the time, right? But they're not real. The thought is not real. It's just a thought. It's a process. The manifestation of a process is not the reality. What we do with the thought, what we commit ourselves to, becomes the reality. That's why I can think a negative thought and do nothing with it. Hence, it's not real. It's gone. Boom. Gone. Positive thoughts, negative thoughts. I can allow them to come like a river torrenting right through me, and I can allow them to go right over me. When I choose to act on something, what I choose to act on then becomes my reality. Could you imagine making every thought a reality? Think of the negative statements that you have interpreted wrongly. Think of the statements you've made negative, hence you've made a decision, you've made emotions, you've made words, you've made deeds out of something that weren't real. But you made them real because they justified something in your mind, your conditioning. And now you've got this whole giant reality of negativity around you. You've got gossip, and you've got innuendo, and you've got slander, and you've got libel. You've got all these things going on about people because you thought. Thought what? Thought what?
But doesn't collective thought have force?
Collective thought only has force if you acknowledge it as real. I never participate in collective thought. I respect too much my ability to step out of that collective thought and to look at it. Why do you think I'm not a Republican or a Democrat? Why do you think I don't belong to any ism? Because I don't want to be caught up in the swell of thoughts being given and suddenly everybody believes in the thoughts. Look at Nazism. How in the hell do you think 55 million German citizens participated in a massive genocide against gypsies and mental illness? By the way, before the Jews, before the gypsies, do you know who they targeted? Homosexuals and mentally ill. Massive genocide with all the mentally ill. And they justified it by having the scientists, the officials, write where it was a proper euthanasia. So then people thought, okay, it was a thought. It's proper. Okay, it's proper. Then if it's okay to kill homosexuals or anyone that is distilling the purity of the Aryan bloodline, the genetic species, then it must be okay to do it to anybody. If you're not going to hold these people sacred, why would you hold these people sacred? So if you marginalize people, then you demonize people, and then that makes them very easy to destroy. Look at David Koresh. Look at all those people. Exactly what was done in the Nazi regime was done exactly by Janet Reno and the FBI. Just on a little tiny basis compared to a large basis. But that same mindset could do it to a lot of people. And people aren't even looking at the ominous crime bill that was passed that absolutely destroys all your rights of freedom. Now they can collectively tap anyone's line they want to in the United States. Now, a group that has historically invaded privacy, illegally broken the law, never been held accountable for it even though they've been exposed, have absolutely not obeyed the laws they're supposed to be enforcing and protecting, broken them repeatedly. Now, these people even have more power on their side because the consciousness was accepting a collective reality without challenging the consequence of what happens when you make a thought real. How many times did Nixon and Reagan and Bush and Carter, these people, get elected or stay in office because they took something that was not, made our ideas think it was something we should fear, and then attacked it, and then took the victory medal for themselves to boost themselves, keep themselves up in the popularity polls. Now, because I don't belong to any party, I could see that. People in the parties, Republicans, smart guys, graduated from Yale, running around naked in the Skull and Bones groups and those other things, you know, or down at the Yale Club and all these other. These guys couldn't see it, but Gary, we see everything. We're Republicans. You know, we buy what we can't see. Yes, but you got to be a little smarter than that. Well, we are smart. When the Democrats, well, we're intellectuals. Well, because you see Woody Allen films doesn't make you an intellectual. Sorry to say that. You can live on the Upper West Side, you can drunk frumpy, you can have a bad sex life, you can have a bad hair day every day, wear non-designer jeans. It doesn't make you smarter. So it starts with knowing that you're complete now, enough to be enough. Now, when we are excited and attracted by our opposite, what are we really feeling and seeing? When you see something that's absolutely opposite you, what attracts you to it? Curiosity, okay. Curious about what? Curiosity about what?
About what you don't have or what you think you don't have.
About what someone else is experiencing that you're not? What someone else is feeling that you're not?
How different it is from you.
How different. So it means that our curiosity is about difference. So if we are mirroring within our opposite, could it be that what we're mirroring is also maybe a part of our disingenuous way of denying our real self? Is that possible? Yeah. So sometimes we're attracted to our opposite without realizing our opposite is really ourselves. And sometimes we're attracted to our opposite because we genuinely find an interest in seeing the dynamic of our opposite. Life is dualistic. Life is anabolic, catabolic. There is always a dualism going on at all times. In your body, there's a dualism. You're never healthy and you're never sick as a static state. You're always processing health or sickness. The moment you cease processing health, you automatically process sickness. So the day you don't do something good for yourself, you've automatically done something bad for yourself. When you're not activating and actualizing positive thoughts and actions from those thoughts, you're automatically actualizing inertia. There is no point of neutrality in life. That's a hard concept for people to understand. There's no point of being safe where you're away from all of it. You see, when I look at someone, I try to see within that person what it is that either attracts me or repels me. But before I make that step, I want to know from that person's perspective, what do they see in me? And is there a margin somewhere where opposites can coexist? And the answer is yes. And I'll show you how that's done. Because in our society, what we're opposed to, what we see as our opposite, almost universally we try to destroy. Look at the vegetarians who were denigrated for all these decades by the meat eaters. Who was right? Who has happy arteries? The vegetarians or the meat eaters? Right? Who has a healthier body? A healthy vegetarian? One who exercises? One who meditates? Who has a happier disposition? The angry people? Of course. So what you see in someone else, if it also mirrors what you could be and are not being, then you have to deny the reality of that existence. Otherwise, then you have to accept that what you are is not what you should be, right? You're living a false existence. So that's why so often people put other people down. They put them down because, not out of jealousy, but out of not honoring themselves as seen through someone else. That's why we are always reflecting. Before you make any decision, I'm going to give you 5 steps that you should reflect on. Now, these are steps that hopefully will help keep you out of trouble and allow you to make some conciliatory, positive changes. I'm in a line last week going to a movie theater. It was raining. So what? We were waiting, only had another 2 or 3 minutes to wait, and some guy comes up to a couple who was standing there and joins them in conversation. But then when the line started to go in, the guy behind him says, "Hey, you jumped in ahead of us." And they started arguing. And they started pushing, and then they started slugging each other. And I watched this. And it was Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich. And we made them both sit in the back of the theater. And now they're closing down the world. They decided. And after they did this whole tussle, and neither one of them got in the movie theater, right? And they were yelling and screaming. This one guy's a lawyer. Turns out the other guy's a lawyer, right? "I'll sue you, and I'll sue you," and then this all the whole finger. Lawyers point a lot, right? They should have extended fingers like that. And I was thinking, my God, how infantile, how stupid. Think of the other things they would do in life, where immediately when anything challenges them, they react without a thought of the consequences of that action. Now, listen carefully. First, before you make a decision, withdrawal to a non-judgmental space. All right? What does that mean? It means simply take a moment and say, before I act on this, I've got to get myself out of being a part of what I'm judging. Did it ever occur to you that you don't have to become connected to everything that you're participating in? Huh? But we don't. We connect to everything as if we are obligated to it. But we're not. We can be objective only when we become neutral. You can't be objective if you're not neutral. So withdrawing at least allows the process of neutrality to be maintained. Otherwise, you're going to be reacting. Your ego, your defense mechanism. You own a business, right? What if someone came in and wanted to unionize your business? And they wanted to start off at $40 an hour with compensation packages for all your employees. You'd be out of business, right? Your first reaction is, "I hate unions." The union guy, "I hate rich guys who own their own business." Both are wrong. It doesn't mean you're rich, and it doesn't mean that they're greedy, because that person may be speaking for themselves with other people who would think differently if you had a chance to explain that you're willing to pay someone a fair wage, but it has to be based upon the necessity of making a profit and keeping a business going. How many businesses is closed in America because unions refused to pull back and they lost their... Did you ever see any of this stupidity happen? Where they stay out and strike till they all lost their jobs and the business closes? Gee, boy, you proved something, didn't you? Solidarity. We're all unemployed. Now someone else is going to do it, and the price is going to go up, and they're going to hire non-union labor. Well, guess what, union people? Ding, ding, ding. Jimmy Hoffa is still around and reeking in someone's conscience out there. I don't know where these guys run these unions. They don't get smart people to run unions, right? They get greed people to run unions. And these people never figure maybe we could work on some cooperative basis. And the shops that have succeeded and have created some security and respect. But those that just says, you pay us or we break you down, then there's no respect for the person. It has to be in both ways. There has to be a point where both people have some form of common adaptation, not dominance. It's not fair to exploit, and it's not fair to break. And by the way, the unions in this country, 14% of the population in the workforce work for unions. In 1955, it was 54%. In 5 years, it'll be 2% because of GATT. Mark my words, listen carefully. What you're about to see in America has no precedence. Because of GATT, every major corporation that can get overseas and create their product or service in a third world country where they're not bound by environmental rules, child labor rules, workman's compensation, insurance, can pay labor $3 a day, they're going to make a product and bring it in at half the price. All the other companies that want to stay here and honor the local community and local people are going to go out of business, so they're going to have to move to compete, because with no barriers now for tariffs, none of these massive support systems and subsidies by governments to artificially create a denial of free trade, all that is gone. Everyone that's a member, and no country has any more power than any other, and none has any more say. So America is on the same footing as Sri Lanka. America is on the same footing as Haiti. Yeah. So could you imagine, since we're the largest consumer nation in the world, what's going to happen when all these inexpensive products come in? Now, the average American is going to say, well, if I have a choice between buying a television that's made in Taiwan for $200 or the television, same quality made in the United States for $400, but it's going to keep a lot of Americans at work, I'm going to go for the $200. Look at what Walmart has done to all those small mom and pop stores all over America. How many tens of thousands of Americans today are out of work because the big company came in and says, our mentality is simple. We're like a great white shark. We merely procreate and eat. That's all we do. All right? They eat up the competition, and they continue to procreate their little offspring. Now look at what they've done. Look at all the little tiny nice quality stores that have been around for generations, selling quality, knowing people, giving real service, someone you could rely upon, someone that gave a sense of ambiance to the community. And now Walmart comes in, or Kmart, and let's say you have a bicycle shop. And everyone in that town learned how to get their bicycle fixed and repaired and from you. But now Walmart comes in and buys bicycles out of Taiwan and retails them for less than what you can pay at your cost. You can't compete. Where are these people going to go? Are the neighbors going to continue to support you? If they were ethical, if they understood the consequences of their actions, maybe not. But people today don't care. We're a discount nation. Everything's discounted. Our education, our intellect, our morals, everything's discounted, right? We're bottom basement bargainers and on every level. So they're going to wipe out every single small business. And the only people who are going to survive are the people smart enough, adaptive enough, creative enough to go out and start a service that the big boys can't compete with, something that gives you unique originality, quality, and style. That's where 25 million of my generation are now at. The younger people haven't had that ability yet. They're not in there yet. And the older people, it was too late for them in their lives, they felt, to change. But our generation, the baby boomers, by the way, we employ more people than all the Fortune 500 corporations combined. We do. People have 2 employees, 10 employees, because we got to be smarter and we got to be better than all those mega. So you see, mega, massive, billion, doesn't mean you're better, doesn't mean you're smarter. And that's why when you understand what you can do, you can make adaptive changes. But the people who are in the unions have a big problem. They're not the creative part of America's force. You don't see massive amounts of union people going out and opening up their own business because they're primarily the adaptive supportive energies. They're a life energy that is there to help facilitate structure. They are the foundation upon which society rests. And unfortunately, they have been maligned and abused, and they do not deserve the kind of denigration they have received. They have been called non-motivated. They are highly motivated, but their level of vibration, their life force, their needs are different. Could you imagine if we all wanted to go out there and change the world, if we all wanted to own our own business? Who would be the mailmen? Who would be the bakers? Who would be the farmers out there making the foods that you go and buy unlimited supplies of? Who would put the windshield in your car? Who would be the insurance actuary? Who would be the electrician, or who would fix your television set? Who would install or make your shoes and your clothes and your dry cleaning equipment? Who would do these things? Yeah? Who's the sanitation people? And yet we don't consider them insignificant because they're not a part of the ruling elite in society. But they are essential. They are essential to everything because it's upon their shoulders that everything else is built. Donald Trump couldn't go out there and build his own castles, could he? No. But I don't see him inviting the very people who allowed that because they think that they're only functionary. Oh, you're just a carpenter. Only a carpenter? Only a mason? Only a plumber? No, not an only. A very essential part of everything. And unfortunately, in a society that has a hierarchical order, the masses on the bottom, are never inspired to make changes. So they don't. Collective consciousness means they stay within the paradigm. Most of these people, the vast majority, they don't want to be president of anything. They're not greedy. They're very giving. And they're very supportive. They're very trusting. All they ask for is just give them, some of the basics. Now I'm going to deal with that. But other people don't want the basics. They want excessive basics. Well, there's this kind of rule in life. To the degree that one thing is given, something else is taken. And I don't think we appreciate that. Can you really karmically, can you profit at someone else's loss and enjoy your profit? Can you? You may think you can in the moment, but you are paying for it in ways that you won't even understand if you just use your conscious mind. Conscious, you just think, oh, these idiots, I profited, they lost. That's not the way life should be. So withdraw before you make judgment. Then examine the statements, feelings, and actions as you were not involved. So if someone writes me a letter and it's a critical letter, like I get doctors sending me critical letters all the time that I'm making statements, that are stupid or something, I don't immediately say, oh, this, and write him off an angry letter. I don't. I look at it and I say, now, I'm going to look at this if I'm not involved, if I'm just reading this. What does it really say? What's really being said here? Then I go to open a dialogue. Don't create an artificial reality fueled by hypersensitivity and emotionalism, which will cause a response. So I'm not going to respond out of a hypersensitive ego. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to open a dialogue. I'll call someone and I'll say, and I do this. I say, hi, I'm Gary Null. I got your letter. Thank you for writing me. I'd like to know what it is that you are wanting to share with me that could help me better understand why you wrote this. And maybe you could explain something other than what was in the letter. First, it kind of catches them off guard because they're expecting me to say, you're wrong, I'm right, I've got this, you don't have that. No, I don't do that. I don't try to make the other person wrong. To the contrary, one of the best ways in the world to resolve a problem? Ask the person who helped create the problem to be a part of the solution for you. See if that doesn't work. Because immediately when you get someone, I'll tell you, this was something, I was down on a retreat, and I was out on the highway and I was jogging. Some country boys came by and they saw me jogging out there, and they started to yelling and do their little ego things, and then about 10 minutes later the truck comes back down the road and I'm still running, and they pull off the side and they all kind of get out and block my way there, and I looked at the biggest guy and I walked up to the biggest guy, and they're calling me all kinds of names because, mind you, they're big guys, and what they see in me is what at some point in their life they probably wish they would have done for themselves, get themselves into shape, run, but they haven't. They got the big beer bellies, they got the attitudes to go with it, and they're defending it completely. And so I asked the guy, I said, maybe you can help me. I really would appreciate your help. I don't understand what their anger is about. Could you maybe help me understand what their anger is about? And suddenly this guy's, he was the one doing all the yelling, and he just kind of stops. He's looking at these guys. He says, what are you all angry about? Well, you're the one who said stop the car. Let's go beat the hell out of faggot. And I said, you impress me as being a pretty smart guy. I lie completely. And I said, I like the state. I'm a Texan, and I'm representing America on the American team. and I'll bet you're also an American, and you want to see the Americans do well since we're competing against 160 other countries, including the Russians and Germans. Yeah, you got to kick shit out of those Russians. Yeah, get those Germans. I says, well, that's what I'm going to be doing. So when you see us on television, and you see me running by there, and you see me competing for the American team, just remember that we're both Americans. We're both friends, right? Stuck out my hand and said, yeah! You know, and then I suddenly get getting cheered. Yeah, get out here. I went, again, simple. Now, I could have done what I did back when I was immature, back when I was 19 and learned a lot of martial arts, and someone had done that. I'd have said, well, I'm going to break your jaw. You know, I'm going to take this leg and I'm going to hit you right there before you can blink, and I'm going to hurt you. I don't want to. This big guy, I did this when I was small. I was only 147 pounds and 5'10". But because I had a salad where I was working each day, they really got bent out of shape. And then here comes this big guy, and he takes my salad and he throws it away. And so 3 days he did that. And then I was writing poetry. Then he took my poem and he tore my poem up. And that was it for me. And I hadn't gotten to New York, hadn't gotten into meditation yet, you see. So I said, excuse me. I says, could everybody come over here? And so here's this little skinny me, little wiry guy, right? And here's this big guy. And I said, fellas, I want to be your friends. I'm not a strange person. I eat some salad. I'm sure you eat salad. It's just that I don't eat the meat that you eat with the salad. That doesn't make me so strange, does it? And I'm doing some writing. I says, I'm sure some of you guys have read stuff. Haven't you? You know, you get this kind of, read stuff? What's that? And did any of you see Deliverance? That's what I was talking with. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my hometown. So, it is, really is. So, I saw nothing was going to work because, unfortunately, there only this false masculine ego makes a difference. They don't respect any other kind of dialogue. And so I simply said to the guy, I don't want to hurt anyone. And they all started laughing. I says, I specifically don't want to hurt you because you're the biggest and strongest and toughest, and you're this mean, big, 285-pound guy. And he looked at me and he says, I think I could throw you about 30 feet. And they're betting how far he could throw me. So now everybody's got a bet out. And I said, I don't think so. I said, but I'll tell you what. I said, if you can't throw me 30 feet, can we be friends and let me eat my salad and write my poetry without hassling me? He said, yeah. I said, okay. And boom, hit down on his kneecap, crushed his leg, and he went down like that. And he was down. And then I got him down, and I took his Adam's apple. I said, now, I think underneath all this big macho stuff, you're a decent man, and there's a nice guy in there. I'd like to hear from that nice guy, or I'm going to simply block your wind now, and you're going to die. And no one was moving. He goes, I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice guy. I said, I sure you were. And I helped him up. And that was it. We became best friends. I wouldn't do that today. I wouldn't do that today. But back then, that was when I was 18 and stupid. And I learned lessons about how you respond to people, but I see people doing that in metaphorical ways. Punishing, superseding. The ego's always out there outdoing. That machismo thing, that Mediterranean thing, you know what I mean? A lot of you are Spanish. Who's Spanish in here? You know exactly what I mean, right? You know, my mother, you know, and it's a black thing too, you know what I mean? A lot of this ego stuff, you know, like, and suddenly everybody's up, you know, defend that ego. Well, what if you didn't have to defend the ego? Then you take a step back. Then it's neutral. Say all the names you want. Names don't bother me. Oh, yes, they do. And then you go on, and you're saying, yeah, just a word, isn't it? Just some syllables, words. I'm more than words and syllables, right? Say all you want. Say every name. Say it as loud and vulgar. Say everything you know how to say. You rotten, dirty, I'm not reacting. Think of how many times you react when someone says something and they know what to say to get you to react. Right? Huh? What would happen if you didn't react? You didn't give the word power. The word doesn't have any strength. It has no reality unless you make it real, right? You got to make it real before it's real. You got to give it life before it has life. Otherwise, it drops. Woodpecker, it just drops. Doesn't mean anything. Unless you're one of those people who gets offended by the word woodpecker. Woodpecker? Damn, man, I got to kill you now saying woodpecker. I just don't let words have the meaning other people want in my life. Don't let words hurt you. They can't hurt you unless you allow it. This is what a dialogue helps. Then from the opening of dialogue, we go to a reflection. Allow reflection. Give some time to make a decision. Then we go to ask for others' input. How do they view the events? Then lastly, place yourself in the other life. How would I feel? What kind of response would I would likely make or need to make if I were the other? A week ago, I saw someone denigrating someone. And it wasn't the kind of denigration most people would take as denigration, but it was a doctor to a patient. And I simply walked up to the doctor and I said, "Excuse me a second, could I see you for a moment?" And the doctor went in a room with me and I says, "Now, are you aware that you just denigrated this person in front of all the people out here? A person comes to you who is sick. They're suffering. They're in pain. You're supposed to be here not only to nurture the body, but to help them on an emotional level as well. You took something insignificant and you made it significant. That person sees you as an authority figure. They're never going to respond to you as an equal. As a result, they're going to walk around now feeling very bad. The disease was bad enough. Now how they feel is going to be worse. Before you lash out at someone, ask yourself, what would it be like to be on the other end receiving that abuse? How would it feel? And if it doesn't feel good, don't share it. That's a rule of life. If it doesn't feel good, don't share it." And so he went out and he took the guy aside and quietly apologized. He then went around to all the other people and apologized. He said what I did was wrong. And he was. At least he had the decency to realize he was wrong and correct it. A lot of guys would have, their ego would have gone up and they would have lived with that, I can't apologize, I've committed my ego to it. Bad things happen when we commit our ego to things. Now, cultural political stability means we support special interests, right? In other words, to have a stable society, you have to have certain beliefs that the society as a whole holds, which means you have to have a political system and an economic system, an educational system, and a cultural system that has certain guidelines. Now, which means that special elite minorities create a monopoly always in every institution, right? They do in the legal profession, right? There are lawyers who have more inside ways, or accountants, as you would have inside ways. And once you understand how to get into the ruling elite of any group, then suddenly you remove yourself from consequences of your actions. And therefore you look at everyone else as being the other. Now, when you see that a society as large and diverse as our own is controlled by a relatively small number of special interest groups, and I took the time to look out who really controls America. Now, this is significant because you cannot separate one ism from any other ism and still understand how your life is functioning or what choices you have, because these institutions will control your choices, because they control the media, they control the school system, they control the curriculum, they control the political systems in every area. And it's not about Democrat and Republican. These people exceed those artificial little standards. These are the multinational groups. Now, being a multinational doesn't mean you're bad, doesn't mean you're unethical. It just means that you don't recognize boundaries. You have no sovereignty to any one group. Yours is a marketplace. You see everything as a commodity. Therefore, every action is based upon its return of profit to you. So you make no moral judgments. All you do is dictate that your economic interests exceed all other standards. Now, how does that work? All right? So, by the way, there's only 35 international corporations with interlocking directorates, and they all have interlocking directorates, control 90% of all the major paradigms in America, and shortly the world. You're talking about companies that do nearly, collectively, $10 trillion in business. They control so much. And we allow them to control this because we believe that they have that special and unique knowledge and gifts and skills. And they try to make us feel that we're not as educated, we're not as bright, we're not as unique to stand out. So we need their control. We need their advice. For instance, the Council on Foreign Relations. Fine, it's a legitimate group. But I didn't give it permission to make decisions about how the world should be and what our economic forecast should be and how we should relate with other countries. I didn't give it my permission. So who gave it the right to make decisions that affect me and everyone else? They took it upon themselves. Why did they? Because they are also the people who run the banks, who run the politicians, who run the Federal Reserve. They run everything. They have their hands everywhere. And they have no loyalty. That's why they'll put different people into offices, different people into special positions. They'll take the best and the brightest of institutions, co-opt them by bringing them into their cushy little club where you become Teflon proof. You get everything you've ever wanted, every dream you've ever had you can have, and you have unlimited access to power. Just the access to power excites people, not just the power itself, the access. Look what happened when Clinton, very smartly, and Gore, very smartly, invited all the heads of the environmental institutions in for their Friday afternoon get-togethers. Suddenly, we have no major teeth in our environmental bills anymore. Literally. I mean, it was so clear and so patently abusive what they did. They undermine our entire environmental movement, what we took all these years. Why? Because every institution has a hierarchical order. And hierarchical orders almost always function the same. You can have a feminist organization, and look how political it is at the top. It lacks every idealistic feminist ideal at the top. It functions like a military operation, like a group of commandos. Churches function the same way, at the top. Where you get more decency, honesty, where you get more of an egalitarian approach, a more humanistic approach, is at the bottom of the scale, not at the top. Isn't it interesting that the people most important, most significant, most essential in every aspect of our life are least able to understand what it is to be the person who is at the other end of what they're giving? Because they've removed themselves. They don't live near you, do they? They don't shop where you shop. They don't eat in the restaurants you eat in. They don't swim in your community pools. They don't go to Jones Beach. You don't see, you never will see, and you haven't seen a CEO from any Fortune 500 company sitting out with you at Brighton Beach, have you? No. And you can't get into their exclusive clubs, can you? No. Unless you're rich and powerful, can you get in the Bones and Skull Club over at Yale? No. Can you get invited to the Bohemian Club and run around the woods of California with Henry Kissinger and other people naked going, ooh, ooh? No, I don't think so. We're going to bring Henry out of the closet. Isn't it interesting how we exclude the very people who could be giving us some sense of balance? But here's the irony. The people most able to lead people are the people who spiritually would not want to command other people. So the best and the brightest at helping us are the ones who withdraw their energy so that those who are only superficially bright, superficially wise, and completely transparent except for their highly aggressive mercenary self-interest rise to the top. If you're willing to be ruthless, you can be president in the United States, because we've never had a president that was both compassionate and bright in the last 100 years. There's no such animal. Isn't it interesting? Shit rises to the top in America. And yet they control every single decision, right? I wouldn't give a $5 billion loan to Brazil to build a hydroelectric plant in the middle of the Amazon and displace natives and destroy 2,000 endangered species when there's no need for it, and give $2 billion of that to a Swiss company that's attached and associated with this interlocking directorates with the World Bank's parent and lending banks, multinational companies that sit on multiple boards. I wouldn't give $2 billion to a California-based singular-owned family construction company that does $25 billion a year in international construction that has no oversight from anyone. I wouldn't do that, but they do it. One of the most corrupt organizations in the world. One of the most... I'll go beyond that. And I've thought of this carefully. I will state on the record that I believe that the consequences of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund has left a major part of the third world near destitution and has caused needless suffering and death. And yet they're praised instead of being condemned. Because who's on their boards? Who sits on their advisory panels? Who runs around in the Bohemian groups? Who's on the International Council of Foreign Relations? Trilateral Commission? Same group of people. And I'm not a conspiratorialist. I'm merely looking at the facts of how it works. Now, how does it work in a practical sense for you and I, right? Let's look just you and I. Here's what happens when you don't realize who's controlling what and why they're controlling it. You're led to believe from the time you graduate from high school that you have to achieve certain status as a man. What are some of the things you have to achieve?
Financial success.
Financial success. How's that measured?
Dollars, house you buy.
The house you buy. All right, so you got to buy a house, right? And it's not just any house, right? You don't graduate from college and say, I want to buy a house in the South Bronx. Right? You ought to see it, man. It's perfect. The third floor is burnt out, the first floor is drugged in, and I got a second floor. No, you don't do that, right? So buying a house is important. What's a house? What's a house?
A dwelling.
A dwelling, right? Did you ever decide what kind of dwelling you'd like to live in?
Many times.
Right. Do you need to own something to live in it?
No.
No. If you were free to live anywhere, where would you live?
Good question.
Right?
I don't know.
If you didn't have to be in one place permanently, wouldn't you enjoy seeing a lot of different places?
Yes. Absolutely.
But if you tie yourself down to something you can't afford unless you work beyond normal limits so you don't have a life that's imbalanced, then they control the economy by getting you to artificially spend what you don't need to maintain an image that you are a part of the American dream.